Hello and good evening, everybody.
Evening, everybody.
Welcome. Um, right, another special one tonight. Another privilege, shall I say? On tonight we
Yes.
have Godfrey Bloom, and just a bit of background on Godfrey Bloom. Godfrey Bloom is a libertarian author with 6 books published with both military history and an Australian School of Economics. He worked in the City of London, where he won an international prize for fund management, fixed interest, with Mercury Asset Management. Godfrey finished his city career as general manager of a life insurance company. He represented Yorkshire and Lincolnshire in the European Parliament and was a staunch campaigner of Brexit for 25 years, which I think beats quite a few of us. During his term of office, he attracted over 60 million views on his chamber speeches, exposing state, bank and tax malpractice on Facebook and on YouTube. Please go and have a look. I shall put the links to his pages in live. Thought to be an all-time record, I think, if I remember correctly. Sort of thing. He brought experience, if not influence, to the mainly EU Parliamentary Monetary and Economic Affairs Committee, putting both members and European Central Bank President under unaccustomed pressure. I think we've all seen some of that. Godfrey Bloom passed out of Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in 1976 and served as a logistics liaison officer with the 4th Armed Division in Germany. He is an associate member of the Royal College of Defence Studies and has presented papers and lectures to the RCDS, Joint Service Staff College, National Defence University, Washington, and too many universities to list, really. His speciality is procurement and geopolitical military strategy. Godfrey Bloom is a holder of the Territorial Decoration and Bar, Sovereign's Medal, Armed Forces Parliamentary Medal, and European Parliamentary Silver Medal. And not to mention, he's also married to one of Europe's leading equine physiotherapists. I hope everybody enjoy it. Bear with me. Welcome, Godfrey Bloom. Good evening, sir.
Hello, good evening to you, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me.
No, honour to have you, sir, again. I mean, same as last time, everyone enjoyed it, so looking forward to this one. Had a lot of feedback from the last show, as I spoke to you a bit about briefly earlier for the show. A lot of people want to hear more from basically for you to expand on what you were saying last time about our sovereignty, what our sovereignty means, the power we hold within our sovereignty, and moreover, what is happening to our sovereignty, and what is the likely outcome of that. So, if you can, feel free to jump in.
Well, shall I start with just the implications of our sovereignty? Would that be a good idea to sort of start in chapter 1?
Yeah. Yes, if you would, please. Yeah.
Right. Let's. One of the problems we have in this country is that the concept of British Constitution isn't taught in schools or universities, which means that we have a whole generation of people who don't believe we have a constitution. They think America has a constitution because it's actually written in one document, but of course that's not the point. We both have our constitutions. Ours isn't written in one document for historical reasons. And the reason the Americans have one written in one document is because they felt in 1776 they weren't getting the benefit of things like the Bill of Rights of 1688, the Tolerance Act and the Act of Settlement, and all these things that were giving freedom or protecting the freedom of the people. No taxation without representation, so on and so forth, all of which we know. And people of my generation know, because that was sort of part of your educational situation. Now they don't do that now. So generally speaking, people do not understand in this country, in the main, what is their birthright from a constitutional perspective. And I've made this analogy before, and forgive me for using it again. I have a drawing room which is full of knickknacks from travels from all over the world, and people and family and ancestors and so on and so forth. So you will find a silver snuff box, Georgian snuff box, sitting alongside on a windowsill, a plastic gondolier from a trip to Venice. So it's a right mismatch of stuff. Now, of course, if you came round, you could nick almost anything, and it would be years before I realised it had gone. I just say to my wife, "What happened to that Georgian snuff box?" She says, "I don't know." Now, this is the problem we have with this country. It's very easy to steal things from people who don't know what they have. And nearly 90% of the population don't know what their birthright is. So if you, and I've done this, believe it or not, and I've asked this at major universities. I was speaking to the history faculty at Durham University a few years ago, and I was speaking to third-year history undergraduates. They couldn't give me the date of Magna Carta. They couldn't give me any of the principles or the 5 principles of English law. And they didn't know anything about the Bill of Rights or Toleration Acts at all. And I actually looked at the blank faces and I said, "Oh, what is it, your history undergraduates? What is it you're studying?" And a young lady in front of me said, "I'm doing women's studies from 1850 to 1890. I said, "Well, I'm sure that's very interesting for a doctorate, but not for a degree."
No.
So as long as you don't fraudulently claim to be an historian when you leave Durham University, you'll be all right. But never call yourself an historian, because you're not. And the problem we have even at universities and top universities now is that you don't get an education. There is no educational procedure. It's box ticking. So you go to school, you tick the boxes, you get your straight A's, tick, 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 straight A's. Then you get your 2-1 at Newcastle University or some such place. You play rugby and you go to parties and all that kind of thing. Nothing wrong with that, incidentally. I'm all for that kind of thing. But don't pretend you've had an education when you come out of one of these universities, because you haven't. You're not educated. And you only need to know that when you saw David Cameron, who got a first at Oxford in what I think was probably just drinking studies. He was being interviewed on an American program, and they started to talk about Magna Carta. And of course, as you well know, on this program, there's a fair copy of Magna Carta in Washington, and that was their constitution was based on that. He looked embarrassed. He obviously didn't understand anything about it. Now, there's a man who has an Oxford degree. He's probably got a laminated certificate in his downstairs lavatory saying he got a first at Oxford, but he's not an educated man as I would understand it.
No, not as far as I would class education anyway.
So, and he is one of a political genre, which means that we're in this situation where nobody really knows what our constitutional protections are. The protections of the Bill of Rights, the Toleration Act, and Magna Carta, and before that, because that was not the institution, Magna Carta, of our legal privileges and rights for the common man. It went before that in Anglo-Saxon times.
Doom law, and before that, because we have the Malmentine laws.
Absolutely. And so because people don't know that, it can be taken away. And so, for example, just let's go recently, let's talk about the lockdown. The lockdown was totally and utterly illegal against our constitution. It was illegal. You can't do that against our constitution.
Constitution repugnant. We said that. That's why we petitioned Crescenda Dick.
Exactly. And of course, I'm teaching Grandy Suckage. You know all this, and I know you know it. So this is the problem. And so people think that the government could do that by issuing a temporary statute, which they can't. And then, of course, we have a situation where the coronation oath and the Bill of Rights, which comes from the Bill of Rights, of course, is that we have to be governed to our natural historical laws. And that is the coronation oath, and that is in the 1688 Bill of Rights, and it follows right through. And it has done in our constitutional parliamentary democracy and our constitutional monarchy. Now, sadly, and I never criticized Her Majesty because I held the Queen's Commission. I felt that it would be inappropriate for me to do so. But of course, she abandoned her coronation oath by signing the accession to our joining of the European Union, which is quite illegal. And she failed in her, and she failed more and more as she went through. And I had, it's not a breach of confidence now, because he's dead and Her Majesty is dead. But I was having drinks. I was on a committee with the Duke of Edinburgh, and we were having drinks. And he said to me, obviously in confidence, but it doesn't matter now because he's gone and she's gone, that she virtually signs now anything her ministers put in front of her. That was his words, not mine. And so this is a very sad thing. And of course, now we have a new king who is quite clearly, unashamedly, and it's not a conspiracy theory, there's no theory about it, it's perfectly upfront, who is a World Economic Forum stooge. He shares platforms with Carl Schwab and all these other people, Klaus Schwab and all these other people. His son, likewise, the now Prince of Wales, likewise. We have a prime minister who is a stooge of the World Economic Forum, ex-Goldman Sachs and total spiv. Likewise, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and sadly, the Archbishop of Canterbury. The cancer runs very deep. And even the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, who was asked only a few months ago whether he thought Davos was more important than Parliament, he said, yes, of course, Davos is more important. That's where things happen in Davos, not Parliament. He's the leader of Her Majesty's opposition. Now, he may think that, to actually say that, and to a resonating silence of the press, you would have thought the press would have jumped on that and said, here's a man who wants to become prime minister as leader of the opposition at the next session, who doesn't actually believe in a parliamentary democracy. He's actually said so. There's no theory here. There's no theory.
That's the thing. He's come out of he's come out with some very telling statements,
I don't know, where do we go?
What's your take on his father-in-law, Rishi Sunak's father-in-law, being into all this emphasis, this digital ID, when surely that's unconstitutional as well? It's a conflict of interest, surely that is.
Well, yes, it's designed of the most sophisticated surveillance situation, which of course we've always rejected in this country. Up until only a few years ago, the concept of carrying ID was an anathema to British people, because we are supposedly a free society. Free-born Englishmen should not need in their own country to carry any form of papers in order to prove their situation. So we have another problem, of course. The indigenous population is being gradually pushed out as more and more incomers take over in thousands, in hundreds of thousands. Nobody knows who they are. And so, of course, your man on the Clapham omnibus, that famous man on the Clapham omnibus, says, yes, well, we need that, don't we? Because we don't know who's in the country and what their backgrounds are. Well, whose fault's that? Whose fault's that? It's the government's fault, isn't it, for letting people in? And so they need ID and photo ID, and they need to be tracked all the time and this kind of thing. And this is what they're saying, and this is where digital currency is going to go. It's quite clearly that we're heading for a social credit system and programming of a digital currency. That's again, it's no theory. It isn't a theory. This is quite obvious, and it would be made obvious if we had a mainstream media which was independent. But of course, we don't. The man or woman you see on the BBC or Sky or Channel 4 is reading a press release from deep state. Not even our parliament. He's reading, or she is reading, a press release which has been given in very large manner, but either to fit in with the World Economic Forum, or the World Health Organization, or the IMF, International Monetary Fund, or the CIA. And CIA documents are read out as holy fact. We saw that, did we not, in Libya and Syria and Afghanistan, Iraq, and all this. They're just read out to you like it's fact, in the same way they read out GDP figures, which of course are a nonsense for any Austrian school economists watching this. They're quite ludicrous. And their little eyeballs follow the prompt screen. And I did once do an early morning program with the BBC, and I couldn't resist it. I leant forward and put my hand over the prompt screen, and the guy fell to pieces. He had no brain power or articulation of his own. As soon as the teleprompt went, he said, collapsed. I might as well have punched him in the throat.
Yeah, no instruction, no direction, as they say.
None at all.
But it's the thing. It's like you talk about the WF and how things are written down. It's like with our politics, I don't think most of our MPs know much about our politics as it should be anymore. I mean, the people definitely don't. I mean, people there's positions such as the remembrancer and stuff like that, which people don't even understand actually comes into our parliament and actually affects how things work and how things are put forward and how that links to the WF and internet, well, global finance. It's changed so much in my lifetime. It's changed so much, but I think, as you mentioned last time, it's education. I think they've done this on purpose. They've removed people, kind of. I mean, I've seen it in my lifetime. Kind of politics we used to be talked about a lot when I was younger, but as I got older, it become more and more boring. And like we just leave it to these people up in the suits in this little room, and we don't have to worry about it. And I think many people have got to understand that's the fatal flaw in a lot of what's happened to us. We have to take liability in what's happened because we've allowed it to happen. And part of that taking responsibility is to actually learn how they've done it, what they've done, and to actually address it. And I think that's going to be the hardest way forward, I think, at the moment. I think that's why many people now are starting to sort of look at their sovereignty and understanding their protections, for instance, under the Constitution. And certain bits like that, especially with common law, like you mentioned, it's like there is common law rulings and case law to state about our identification and the fact that we do not have, we are free, so we do not have to identify ourselves unless we've committed a crime and pieces like that. But as you say, it's been removed from the education system. It's no longer an education; it's an indoctrination. You're told what to think, and as long as you parrot it in the correct manner, then, as you said, you get all your boxes are ticked. You get a certificate, a pat on the head, and you've got, as I mentioned earlier, you've got a status over standing. I think that's like I said earlier, main problem I see is how do we move forward with our standing? Because people have got to make some big decisions, I think.
It's been a creeping thing. I've seen it, and you just reminded me then, if you remember, when they brought in the breathalyzer. Which I think was in the late 1960s, I can't remember, but round about then. And Enoch Powell said then, you are insisting that an Englishman incriminates himself by blowing into the bag. He said that is completely against the principles of English law. If you want to prove he's incapable of driving through drink, you have to prove it in a court of law. You can't make him incriminate himself by blowing into a bag, which is a totally subjective way of actually judging whether you're fit to drive. So that was the first thing I remember in my lifetime as a very young man. And there's been other things that have come forward. And one of the most evil things, which is wholly contrary to the principles of English law, and that is the Enabling Act. What they do is they bring in an Enabling Act. They then give it to a government-funded quango, and that powers are devolved onto that quango, totally contrary to the principles of English law. We have that, of course, with Ofcom, don't we? We have that situation. It was never designed that Ofcom could dominate what the content of a program was. That wasn't the original view. It should, where are you, what bandwidth are you using, so on and so forth, from a technical perspective. Now Ofcom can summon a news editor from GB News, for example, and say that we're not happy with your content. Well, this is outrageous. This is outrageous. Freedom of speech. Exactly.
They've become basically the police of our speech.
This is Soviet Union. This is the sort of thing that used to go on in the Soviet Union, to actually say, and we have other journalists, for example, what's his name? Brian Crick, whatever his name is, Crick. I bashed him over there with a thingy once. Anyway, Crick.
Yes, I remember that video.
Yeah, yes. Michael Crick, that's right. Yeah, should have hit him over there with a brick. But anyway, he was on GB News the other day saying that GB News we ought to close you down because you're not reporting the news properly, like the BBC does or Channel 4 does. So in his view, he's a left winger. He thinks the BBC is wonderful because it just projects the news from a left wing perspective. And the head of the civil service is a woman of Ofcom, is a left-wing civil servant. So consequently, she hates the idea of GB News, who might actually criticise the British civil service, which is badly in need of criticism. So we are no longer have a free press. We no longer have investigative journalists. We no longer have the principles of English law, because that quango, let's take Financial Services Act, for example, which is run by the Financial Service Authority. So what they will say to you if you're in financial services, as I was years ago, we will assume you are guilty. And you then have to prove your innocence, that you didn't do this or you did that. There is no presumption of innocence with any regulatory authority, whether it's the VAT office, HMRC, DEFRA. All these people do not assume you to be innocent. They assume you to be guilty, and you have to prove that you're innocent, completely and utterly against the principles of English law.
Well, we're seeing this actually in the judiciary, especially if you look at the family courts, and especially when we're talking about these administrative courts, like magistrates and relatable courts. There is it's the summary judgment. There is a summary judgment. A lot of people don't understand this. So gone is the presumption of innocence. It is decided on whatever's been put forward, and then the procedure just acts on that. So a lot of like you say, our English law, and what makes us a free nation is actually, as you said, like drip fed, slowly but surely, decades after decades, just literally just being drip fed away to the point where it is, with the tank's nearly empty now. I mean, there is some of us that still go into courts and we get things upheld, but it's very reluctantly. Most judges, I would say, are very more leaning towards the way of the controlling of the summary judgment, rather than actually allowing the facts to speak for themselves. And as you say, when we're talking about regulatory boards, it's all a blight on our freedom of speech and our freedoms in general. Really, it's a form of control.
And their appeal systems. Here's a thing with the financial service object. It's really quite extraordinary that the appeal, if you want to appeal, they hear the appeal. If they fine you, they keep the fine. It doesn't go to the local hospice, it goes in their pocket. So you have all these things that are absolutely outrageous. But of course, the reason that they can get away with this largely is because there is no press interference. Now, the two shields for the freeborn Englishman, two shields. One of the principles of English law, which is a shield, which has now been turned in to a stick with which to beat the public. The law is there to beat the public, not protect the public. And of course, this is one of the great problems that we have. And of course, we have all these enabling acts and so on and so forth, which are designed to intimidate the individual and lose the concept of Anglo-Saxon national justice, or what the man on the Clapham omnibus would deem to be fair. And so some of these judgments that you're getting are also wrong, because your legal profession doesn't actually understand the law. They understand, they memorize texts, they memorize this, they know this, and they can look this up in a book, so on and so forth. But if you went for a beer with the average lawyer, his understanding of the law is almost zero. And it was what was particularly funny, I think, if you remember the old Rumpole.
Yes,
and there was somebody, he was being briefed by his client. It was obviously a crook. And he said, well, go on, that's against the law, isn't it? And Rumpole said, well, we're going into a Crown Court. A Crown Court, it's got nothing to do with the law at all. Crown Court, nothing to do with the law. It's, can I persuade a jury to think this way with some outrageous banter? And that's how it is. We now have, of course, with the politicized judiciary, heavily politicized, what we used to call a stipendiary magistrate is now a district judge. I have a number that are friends of mine who are woke to the gunnels. You know, they are woke. And now we see them. The police put eco warriors in front of them. They glue themselves to the M62, and they're released by the district judge, who's normally ex-Oxford and woke and a bit of a lemon, you're doing a jolly good job. Well done, you, and I'm releasing you. And of course, they don't get custodial sentences, which of course is the absolute fear of the middle classes. Most eco-fascists are spoilt middle-class children in the main, and they can get away with this. Now, if they had a custodial sentence, even if it was suspended, it means they can't travel. They can't go to America. They can't go to Colorado to ski. They can't do all the sort of things that petrol-based and diesel-based things that they'd like to do. And they're treated with great reverence by the police. And we all know that they're singing off the hymn sheet of the government deep state. It's a benign environment for them. And of course, if you get out of your car and give one a good clout round the head because he's in your way, they will arrest you. The police will arrest you. Now, I would argue that the way to handle this eco-fascism is simply not to have the police anywhere near. And let chaps like me sort it out. I'll get out of my car. I will sort it out. Yes,
social justice for social warriors. But it's funny you mentioned just in that way, and the fact that we've got a lot of circuit judges and that are woke. It's on the bar website itself. I mean, the bar changed the law exam in 1953 to that of a legal exam, and then coincidentally changed, I think it was 2 or 3 years later, changed the whole education to a legal education. So we are literally seeing, since 1953, judges, solicitors, barristers, and the police, because they're mainly trained in acts and statutes, not so much reliant on criminal law anymore, but they're all trained basically in a political form of legislation rather than actually, as you say, quite 100% correctly, in actual law and the main principles of law. Most of them I speak to, they don't know the main principles. They don't even know what our laws are, but they can reel off acts and statutes like it's literally just a laundry list. It's becoming ridiculous. It's more about pushing paper around, I think, and pushing, I mean, like you say, politicised courts. The courts and Parliament has a direction, and the courts will follow that. And I think many people who are watching it would agree with what you're saying about the social justice warriors. We are seeing it. We are seeing people that mothers and fathers that uphold the rights to protect their children are seeing lengthy prison sentences for protecting their children. Yet these social justice warriors, who, in law terms, should be facing a harsher term. And as you say, they're literally, it's a slap on the wrist, but a quiet wink, and then it's off you go. I'll see you on the piece, sort of thing. It's becoming more of a joke than anything. I mean, our law system and our legal system, it used to be revered all around the world. It has been. Most court systems, most law systems in the world are based on ours, and we've come away from that to become a laughing stock now. I just don't. I understand it. I just don't think many people are going to take the time to understand that and understand where it's going and how we have to make a decision. I mean, I think this is why the Constitution and our sovereignty is so powerful, because it is where the power truly lies. It's like you say, the average man on Clapham Common, I think that's a perfect analogy, because it's us that decide what laws we live by and how we live, not, as you said earlier, some gentleman in a suit that never speaks to the public, doesn't understand what parts of society is failing, what's succeeding. It's an agenda set by somebody that's across the other side of the world. I mean, how are we going to change this? I mean, as you say, education, isn't it? But how do we change the education on this?
Well, it's a difficult one, because kids go to a woke school. It doesn't matter whether it's a state school or public school. I lecture sometimes at public schools as well. They're no different. They're still teaching fake science and on climate and so on and so forth. They're not teaching the principles of English law. They're not teaching about our Constitution. They're not teaching any things that they should be teaching. As I say, they're just ticking those boxes, which isn't an education at all. And so it is a problem. Homeschooling is, so I mustn't call it that, it's home education. Sorry, I've been corrected on this before, quite rightly. Home education is the way forward. I wouldn't dream of sending my child to a state school, or now even the public school, to have nonsense pumped into his head. We've got kids coming home telling their parents that the world's going to end, there's going to be no polar bears, there's no future for them, becoming quite distressed. You can't tell a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old that there's no future, the world's going to boil. You also can't tell a 9-year-old when a great hairy bloke with a beard turns up in a dress that he's a woman. You know, that's very bloody confusing, isn't it, for children?
Exactly,
So,
and you've now got children come home saying, "I'm now a cat." That's
yeah,
how
well,
people say, "I'm now a
yes,
cat."
good for them, because I think there's one thing we don't have in this country which we used to have. I'm sure you'll agree, and your listeners will agree to this. We used to have satire, and the best way of demolishing this nonsense is satire, is humor, and taking the mickey out of it. And you can go right back to the Regency times of Gilgray and people like that, you know, the cartoons, which are wicked and cutting. And then we had, that was the week that was in the 1960s. We had satire. We don't have satire now. There's no satire.
Even the Levelers movement had a certain amount of satire within their publications.
I mean, we could kill this trans business, you know, with some comedy. I mean, it's ripe for comedy, isn't it? I mean, you could write the sketch yourselves, couldn't you? And if we all laughed at it, but we had the bar talking about the bar. They're saying, well, we're confused about how we should addressing people and pronouns and stuff. Can we have some guidance? So you've got a judge, maybe a Crown Court judge, who's got some great hairy chested bloke in front of him who claims to be a girl, and he's actually trying to get advice on how he should handle that. How do they get onto the bench anyway, one sometimes wonders, because they're really retarded, some of them, aren't they?
Very much so, very much so. I've stood in court many times, and some of the things I've said, you can see the judges have had to go and research what I've said, and it's the law, it's the constitution. It's like, you should know this, you're a judge. But as I said, the Bar Association changed all the exam and all the education, so most of them don't understand this. I mean, it's basic common sense, a lot of law, and this is what people don't get. We're all born with the inherent right of knowledge of right and wrong. It doesn't take much. Even children know when they're doing something they shouldn't. So how comes as adults we cannot?
My Jack Russells know when they're doing something wrong. My dogs know when they're doing something wrong. It doesn't stop them bloody well doing it, I can tell you, the little wretches, but even they know.
Do you think, Godfrey, that people will ever realise that you're not going to vote the way out of this tyranny and this oppression, and that they've actually got to make a stand lawfully and peacefully, you know, going to the councils and pointing out the wrongdoings, because it's Britain or any other country is never going to, it's never happened in my lifetime as far as I know, and it's never happened in anything that I've ever researched, where a country has been able to vote its way out of tyranny and oppression. It's always had to have the people actually wake up and rise up to help remove it.
You're absolutely right. Usually. You're quite right. If you live in a city where they're trying to impose this 15-minute business on, there's only one way of handling this. You don't write a letter to the council. You don't turn up to council meetings. It's a waste of time. What you do is you go and you tear them down, and you put bags over the cameras. This is the only way you can do it.
Yeah,
you can't. And if somebody breaks into your house and they're at 1 o'clock in the morning and they're burgling the house and they're sort of threatening your wife and all that kind of thing, there's no point in phoning the police. It'll be half an hour before they turn up at best. You clout the bloke round the head with your cricket bat, don't you? You get on with it. Be a man.
You use your right to defend yourself and property.
Exactly.
It's what you said about the education. I mean, I don't think people understand that schooling is actually the experiment. We've been home educating for thousands of years, but schooling is actually the experiment. And I think people have got this the wrong way around. I don't think people understand that. And I think it's like you say, it's like if we're going to keep putting up willfully, I might add, because that's the way law would see it, you're willfully putting your children in a situation where they're mentally going to suffer harm, I would say. So you've actually got to do something about it. At what point do you take action into your own hands and remove your children? What point do we think we're going to? Because that's how it's going to have to happen. I mean, I think it's been proven. I mean, you're Brexiteer, myself and Gary was campaigning for Brexit for a number of years. I think we proved with that vote alone, literally the biggest vote in our democracy and in our political history, and it's been ignored. So I think it's now time for the people to take things in their own hands. And I would always say lawfully and peacefully. But as you say, there's certain actions that have to be taken and can be taken within our laws.
Well, you see, this is a problem, lawfully and peacefully. But of course, tyranny and tyrannical laws are illegal. So it is the state who's behaving illegally. So if you actually pull those things down in your 15-minute city, you're actually you're acting legally, because they're not allowed to do that. So you're actually you have the legal responsibility, and I would say obligation, to do that. But of course, the people the law, the judiciary has been politicized, and so consequently the people now sitting on the bench are political appointees. And of course, I've had experience this in the army. I might have said this on the last program. It's worth noting. You cannot get beyond 1-star rank or brigadier unless you're politically correct, or vice or rear admiral. You just can't. And I've met these people. I know these people. It's a political appointment. So you have to go with your all the wokery that now is creeping into the army and the navy and all the rest of it. The wokery creeps in because your senior people aren't taking a stand. They've gone mute because they're getting paid a lot of money. They've got a very big pension. It's exactly the same in America. I don't know whether you spotted my interview with Colonel Doug McGregor, which is on my website.
I did actually.
The same thing. Nobody wants to join.
From all levels in the military now, especially if you look at our military, a lot of people just becoming despondent. It's not. Many people have got this illusion of what our military is, but majority of the people I know that have actually been in the military or have got in the military, especially in the last 10 years, say the same thing. It's nothing what they thought it was going to be. It's not why they joined up. It's not what they thought they was joining, and this is all by design. I mean, we slowly. I mean, trust pretty much signed our military away, but it's as you said, with the European Union and the European Communities Act. It's been decided before then. This has been slowly moving towards that.
Of course, it creeps forward all the time. It creeps forward all the time. But there are things that people can do. First of all, it's direct action when the state behaves illegally, i.e. stopping you from traveling to see your mother down that road. That's illegal. All those cameras, they're illegal. So it is your duty, it's your responsibility to your family and to your children and the next generation to actually physically do something about that. That's point one. And I'm quite sure I don't need to say this to your listeners there. If you pay the BBC, you're part of the problem. If you send a check or sign a banker's order to the BBC, you are part of the problem.
100%.
Yeah, so you've just got to stop doing it. Just stop doing it. There's nothing they can do about it.
Well, this is the reason. This is the reason why we have Clause 61 in the Magna Carta, and that is to remove yourself from paying taxes, because it's exactly as you say. But you are literally funding the terrorism, and you are funding the tyranny, and that within yourself you become a co-conspirator, if you will, in law. You become that you are actually enacting that problem. You are fueling the problem, and people have got to understand this and start to take action, as you say. Stop funding these criminals, and they won't have the money or the means.
Of course, Tony Benn got it right, and I know you will have seen that clip. It's an old clip, but by goodness me, he got that right. If you want to get away with murder as a government, you have to keep the population uneducated and in fear. Now, here's the rub. Here's the problem. And you will have experienced this, I'm quite sure, as I have. 80% of the population are pretty gullible and stupid, and only 20% of people actually stand up and say, no, this is rubbish. I'm not going to comply with any of this nonsense. Well, we live in a society now, you only need 80%. And of course, you then keep them fearful, because people without the benefit of a traditional education are easily frightened. So you get them wearing masks for a respiratory virus, which is absolute nonsense. And even on the box of masks, it says this mask won't protect you from a respiratory virus, but people still wear them. Because sadly, 80% of the people are completely and utterly gullible and stupid. One wonders if they're worth saving sometimes, these people. You know, they're taking babes in arms to get jabs. They're doing, you know, they're doing all sorts of things. It makes you want to scream, what is wrong with you? What's the matter with you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think many people have had that thought. It's a case of, are they on? Does the herd actually need trimming, kind of thing? But it's like you mentioned with the mask. It doesn't take a lot of research really to understand what a pulmonary staph infection is and how that comes about. And the masks are a direct cause of that. We know that from the Spanish flu in the early 1900s. We know that from massive, and there is massive amounts of medical data over it. That's why surgeons have to change it. It's a spit guard. It's no more. That's why surgeons have to regularly change, and they change their masks during surgery. It's ridiculous.
My wife is a medic, and she actually did her passing out thesis on masks and the problems of infected masks and respiratory diseases. It was her thesis. That was in 1985, I think. Maybe 1984. This isn't new. We know this, but it was when you had to keep them frightened. And of course, it's very intimidating when you go down the high street, everybody's got a huge mask on, which was the object of the exercise. It was purely political. It had nothing to do with medical safety whatsoever. We know that. It's like numbers on sticks and speeding. It's got nothing to do with road safety. It's 30 miles an hour in my little village here, quite rightly. And it was there. It's 30 for a reason. It isn't. It's 30 because that was the speed of a galloping horse. That's the reason all villages have 30. Then you get into a pothole little single track road and it's 60. It isn't 60 or 30 or 40 for a reason. It's because some banana head put a number on a stick in 1958. And now you have a little policeman sitting there with a speed gun behind a hedge to raise money. You have nothing to do with road safety. It's to raise £100 easy peasy. They don't put them outside schools. They don't put them at black spots. They don't put them outside hospitals. They put them behind hedges just where you would not expect when it's not necessary. We all know that, don't we? We all know that.
But this is the thing, and most of the fines people get, most people don't understand this. Do a bit of research and understand most of the companies who recover these fines are actually owned by the police. So again, we're seeing the people who are causing the or generating the revenue are actually profiting from the revenue. I mean, you talk about speed limits. One of the safest roads in the world is the Autobahn, and that has technically no speed limit. You go with the flow of traffic.
And of course, the Antichrist now is the motorist. They hate us, don't they? I think it comes on the people you love to hate. Now, the top of the list of people to hate are motorists. I think paedophiles now come in at number 5 or 6. And that's probably only because it seems to me quite extraordinary that there are far more paedophiles than one might have imagined, or us ordinary chaps might imagine. Of course, we've got to call them minor attracted now, haven't we?
Yeah, minor attracted people. I mean, yes, they are fast becoming a protected species. I'll say.
I know. Anyway, gentlemen, I've got to go now.
Yes.
But I'll come on again if you like in a few months' time, perhaps, and expand on some other things. And we might have a look at geopolitical strategy next time I'm on, and have a look and expand on that interview I did with Colonel Doug McGregor and other things, because that's something else that's leading us right down the garden path. That one.
Yeah.
I mean,
although
people have to.
It'll be over by the time you interview me next. It'll be over. There'll be a Russian flag in the end flying. That's the long and short of it. Anyway, I've got to sign off now. It's been lovely talking to you, and my very best wishes to you and your followers.
Oh,
it's been a pleasure.
Thank you again,
pleasure as always, Godfrey. So take care. And yeah, we'll love to do it again sometime and expand on that what you've just been speaking about.
Love to do it. Goodbye, everybody.
We'll be in touch. Night, sir.
Well, there you go. Is that finished now? We're still live.
We are still live. I'm going to end this here in a minute now. But yeah, I mean, again,
it's always good to get Godfrey on because he's voice of reason.
Well, this is what we, as we said before, this is what we need more. We need people just to be generally. It's like like Rick would always say, we need open and honest discussion, and this is what we really need. We need people to sort of put their political opinions and their kind of ideals aside, and we have to really start dealing with the reality of the situation we not only face, but the reality of what we're actually in. I mean, most people don't understand when you talk. I mean, people, please research the International Health Regulation Amendments, Agenda 2030. I mean, we're basically about to, like we mentioned earlier, about our sovereignty is our power. They can't take this, but we are letting them. We are literally acquiescing, and they are going to do this. And by the time we think we're going to have a military complex come in, and we're going to have no choice, it will be a civil war. But people got to understand this. Agenda 2030. People keep saying conspiracy theory, conspiracy theory. This is their own document we're talking about. It's like Godfrey said earlier. This is not a conspiracy theory. We're reading from their own documents. These are the very documents that are saying this is what we intend to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is what time we're going to do it by. And people say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. But Agenda 21, that was in the World Economic Forum of 1992. So, I mean, the World Economic Forum has been going for many years, but people call that a conspiracy theories, but it's actually in their own documents. And then you've got Agenda 2030, and a lot of people don't understand this, but it's like, England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales, we are going to be the first countries that have no outgoing ferries or flights or them coming. Literally, we are going to be stuck on this island, and us, well, there's going to be two tiers. There's going to be the rich and the poor, the world in the serfs, as they were. And we are going to be kept here. Our freedom of movement, our freedom of speech, everything is being restricted. And it's time people actually stand up and do something.
Yeah, it's to stop you travelling. I mean, why do you think they're bringing electric cars out for? Because electric cars are blowing up everywhere. So then they're going to be saying, oh, you're not bringing one of them on the ferry. So
it's funny.
And then when, obviously, you've 2 seconds now, you've either got to leave your car here and hire another one, then you get it, the other side, wherever you're going, whether you're going to the Hook of Holland or whether you're going to, from Dover to Calais, doesn't matter where you're going. You've either got to leave your car here and hire one, or you've got to go on foot everywhere, because they ain't going to allow these electric cars on ferries. They're not going to do it.
No, this is it. It's funny you mention electric cars now, because I've actually been looking a bit, and I've watched Fast and the Furious. One of Fast and Furious we were part of yesterday. And one of the scenes in that is they actually remotely hack into all cars that have the main electric component. So it's like so we're now gone from just the pure mechanics to a lot of our cars are actually governed by electronics and computers, and you can hack them. So you will, if people don't think that the central digital banking currency won't come in, you won't be restricted. It will be a credit score system like China. That is the model that WF and the world is going to. Either side, there is so many similarities between the two in their wants and the way they're going to do it. This is how they're going to go. It's like if you say something on here, for instance, you comment on one of our videos or saying something the government don't like, you then won't be able to use your car. They will lock your car down. You won't be able to get into it. You won't be able to start it. And the power to do this already actually exists. This is what people are not understanding.
Well, you imagine 1,000 people on a ferry and they blow one of them cars up, malfunctioning like they did the other week in that city. You've seen the damage it did. That's everybody on that ship's doomed, gone. And it's so easy to do blame all them deaths on the malfunctioning electric car, when really all you've done is put a live bomb on there with people. People need to wake up to what's going on. Stop falling for the bullshit. You don't want electric cars. End of. For one, you've got to keep recharging them every 5 minutes. And two, they're no better, they're no more safer, no more cleaner air than your normal diesel or petrol. It's been proven.
Yep. In fact, they're actually more dangerous, especially in the summertime. We all know, and it's literally been a warning on batteries for decades. Do not put a lithium battery in the sun. So what do? Stick it in a car that's going to heat up, because you're talking about a mass amount of metal that is a complete heat sink. So everything around that battery is heating up due to the sun, and you're literally putting yourself on top of that bomb. And we've all seen like electric bikes, electric scooters, electric buses, electric cars all explode, and literally fire brigades are having a massive problem with this, because it is nigh impossible to put these things out. Once the chain reaction starts and the battery starts burning, it is literally impossible to stop them.
You're sitting there, right? You're sitting there. The battery isn't in the trunk in America at the back, or like it's not under your bonnet. It's under it. You're sitting on top of. It's like sitting on top of a bomb, ticking bomb, waiting to explode.
Yep. But this is the thing.
People can't see it.
As you say, it's now time people actually really start focusing. It's like Godfrey says as well. It's now time to start doing things. It's like we see many people on Facebook. You know this. We've discussed this many times. It's like I hate what happened to them two dogs. I hate what a lot of what's happening. But a lot of people don't understand that these are actually publicised more and allowed to be publicised more, because this is a distraction. As Godfrey says, I've said, you've said, many of us have said for a very long time, the ones that have actually been doing this for a number of years, at least 10 to 20 years, have been telling you this. Not so much the people who've got it in the last 3 years, but we've been telling you there is many distractions. Not to say that everybody's fake or anything like that, but Facebook, for instance, will allow posts about certain things to go before, and we all know this because we all get to put to the bottom, but Facebook allow posts about certain things to be completely shared and spread across the whole of Facebook. But something as important as the fact of you are no longer going to have freedom. You are no longer going to have the right to dignity within your life, medically or otherwise. These things are pushed to the bottom. And this is where people are really going to have to start really being discerning. And you're going to actually have to start really getting to the crux of what actually matters. I mean, I can assure you that we can write notices and stuff, like take the dogs, for instance, that we shot. We can write notices, we can protest and stuff like that, but I can assure you, while you're ignoring the legislation that they're drafting and they're putting through, you're actually creating a situation where you're actually, by law and by their rules, you're acquiescing. So you're allowing them to do this, and soon they will be able to kill animals on site. This is what we're starting to see, and this is nothing to do with them going against animals. This is a bigger picture, and this is to do with, like we said, like Agenda 2030. I mean, these are global agendas. It's like we managed to swerve quite a few bits in the European Union, but these are all unlawful. These are all illegal, and we need to stop the actual source. It's like people go on about the boats and immigration and stuff like that, but you won't go and read the Barcelona Declaration of 1995. And yes, that is a source document. There is a couple others, Marrakesh Agreement and stuff like that, but the Barcelona Declaration guaranteed the acceptance of this. So you don't keep dealing with like the multiple fires. You've got to go to the main fire, the primary source, and you've got to deal with that, which is these international treaties, which are being taken into what, I mean, Gary, you know this just as much as I do. We've been dealing with this for over 10 years. The community laws that the EU have put into, and our government have put into our statute books, they're unlawful, they're illegal, but yet people still, it's like with the Human Rights Act and stuff like that. This is all done by the UN. This is the same group of people that want to teach our under 4-year-olds about sexual relationships. These are the same people that are fighting to guarantee that this immigration on this level continues, and that they have a more direct source to do so. But yet you'll still claim your human rights from these people, that they only have to take into consideration. And it does say in the preamble that human rights only has to be taken into consideration. We are all going to have to swallow that massive pill, and we are, and we're all going to have to start realizing that we have been lied to. And it doesn't mean that you're stupid or anything. It means that this is a very well orchestrated, plot. Is better, I suppose, plan. But this is well orchestrated. It's been enacted over multiple decades. So it's
like Godfrey's just said. There's 15 million cities are unlawful, so you should be able to go and rip these things down because it goes against the Constitution. But what happens is you're up there doing what you're supposed to be doing, ripping it down, and then the police come along, handcuff you, you're up before the court, charged with criminal damage and everything. But now you should not be charged with criminal damage, really, because that shouldn't be there in the first place. It's causing you harm. it could be causing you injury, and it could cause you loss. It could cause all three.
It's loss of freedom and everything. So it's a massive
Yeah.
loss, and especially harm.
No, but what I meant by loss was loss as in loss, harm, and injury, like where through work. But you know, but people are going to suffer all these things because you've told them. It's not we haven't told them, Nathan. They're coming for your house. They're coming for all your properties. They're coming for your cars. They're coming for every single thing you own. And people are just sitting there waiting for their turn for their door to be. We've come for the keys to your house because we're moving you into one of these big blocks of flats. And people will just go like lambs to the slaughter instead of saying, no, going off. You're not having no keys to nothing. And we'll see about that because everybody around here now is awake. Come and try and take any one of our houses and see what happens. And that's where we've got to get back to, the old community spirit.
Exactly. Start looking out for each other instead of looking out for yourself. Standing over status. And this is the problem. I mean, take, for instance, the protests and stuff like that. How many years have I been saying this? How many years have I been trying to get people into courts? There was a public gallery in the court for very good reason. Yes, there is still juries in some cases, but in many cases, so they could do these summary judgments, just like we were speaking about earlier, and so they can have this politicised judicial system.
Yeah.
And the reason why they do that is because the public gallery is empty. So if you really want to do some good and you really want to spend a day out, and I do know some people like to gather, they like to go for a drink and a lot, but you can do that after. Go to the public gallery, start witnessing what the courts are doing to people. So when, as like Gary says, when you've got a protest, and I don't mean like what we're saying, we don't mean the liberals and things like that who want to glue themselves to a road, but when somebody's actually stood up or something's happened and somebody really is fighting against the system, fighting for their freedoms, we should all be in that court, not shouting and screaming, because you don't. You've got to be respectful. If you want respect, be respectful. So, but go there and witness, and that will scare the courts more than anything, because the courts, like in a few cases I've been in, the public gallery is almost full, and the judge notes everything. It's like, well, clearly there is massive public interest, and that's what we need. We need public interest back in the courts. So go and sit quietly and make and show that you are watching what the court's doing. Let's start watching it. Let's start putting ourselves back where it needs. I mean, we can all go and say, Gary, we done it for how many years? We was on the streets, we protested, and eventually you do realise that it's being ignored. But what can't be ignored is these judges, when they start seeing everybody in the court and you're literally watching what they do, they're going to start getting worried, because then the public might start going, well, that's not right. Because if we had juries back, we wouldn't have this, because it's like Godfrey says, you've got someone who glued themselves to a road and caused complete disruption when next week they're booked on a flight to a foreign country to go up a hill and ski down that lot and use diesel and petrol all the way. I mean, look at the Extinction Rebellion. I think the leader of that, she was caught buying her shopping in a very well-known expensive shop in a diesel car. So that it's hypocrisy.
Yeah.
If we had juries back, if we had the normal people in these courts in juries, this would change, because the law system could not do this. But to start getting that back, we've got to show the court that we are again interested in justice, and that
this is where I think we're going wrong as well. The people ain't going to like what I'm going to say now, but it's the truth. And that is, you'll get people online saying, you see, like somebody famous like Tommy or Kate Hopkins and all these people, you know, all the ones who are in the higher up sort of echelons, and they'll say, oh, praying for you, Tommy, stay safe, Kate, praying for you. Oh, we love what you're doing in this and other. Yes, that's lovely, but it's not your prayers. They do want your prayers, but more than your prayers, they want your support. They don't want you sitting at home praying for them. They want you on the street standing next to them. That's what they want.
Exactly. This is exactly what the Long March for Freedom is about. It's about everybody, all groups, everybody getting together and coming together as one. Proper unity amongst the people, instead of, again, status over standing, instead of this competition. I mean, it's like we see it many times. People will say on our lives, love you too, love what you say, you're so right. But yet they won't share our videos, they won't push the content, they won't push the declarations and stuff we're talking about. So they're because this is what we really need to do. We need to start educating. So instead of like the latest fad, we need to start pushing what really matters. So things like the Sustainable Development Agenda 2030, we need to really start because the press are not going to do it. So we need to do it. And that's how we need, this is how we do this. And like Godfrey says, we can have fun with this, people. Satire. We can actually have satire with this. It's not hard. You just need to focus. You need to push the right things. And I know everybody on a, because this is the problem with the moral aspect. There is certain things that are going to hit home to people more than other things. But you've got to understand they all come under one umbrella. So you're seeing things about like what the police are doing, what they're capable of doing, what they're legally allowed to do, and what they're getting away with. Don't deal with them separately. Deal with the umbrella of our police force, because it's no longer constabulary, it's a police force. So deal with the primary problem. Stop dealing with like the fourth, fifth problem in line. Go right to the source and let's start dealing with that, and then we'll really start seeing change. I mean, we've seen it in what we've done and what other groups have done and what other people have done. The people that really do apply themselves to the right area and do the right thing, like I say, the primary problem, the things are changing. Things do get changed. The problem is the majority are too busy over here watching a small fire when there's a big inferno raging the size of a forest over here. It's ridiculous. We've got to start adapting and changing the way we actually deal with these things.
We've said this many times. People will really put this out, and if you want to sit by and watch the tyranny and the oppression and everything else that they're doing to you, if you want to watch that increase and make them feel, you know, they're sticking their chest out even more like a proud peacock and that, because there's nobody questioning it. Everybody's just, you know, letting them beat them up and letting them do this and letting them and telling them you ain't leaving your house because we say so. Who are them to tell you can't leave your house, ladies and gentlemen?
Exactly.
You've got, like we've said, we've got unalienable rights. They are no different to you, me, Nathan, anybody else. They're just human beings like we all are. They've got no extra power over you. In fact, the only power they've got over you is your consent and your compliance. You take that away and lose the fear, they are nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Nobody is above the law, not even a king or a queen under our constitution, and that is there for a reason. And I know most people, there's many people still say we haven't got a constitution, but like Godfrey says, we do have a written constitution. It's written over 800 years in multiple documents. But for some reason, people seem to think unless it's in one document, it's hard to understand. No, it's not. It's not for the people who are actually educated. As I said, Godfrey Bay says earlier, for people who are educated, it's not hard to understand the laws across them 19 to 21 documents. But for somebody who's indoctrinated, that has only understands legislation and literally is just got the IQ enough to be clever enough to do as they're told, but not question, these people will find it hard to understand these laws. But mainly it's because they're not taught them. They're just told, well, these are too difficult to do this, it's easier. And this is what we have in society. This may be a little bit difficult to just do this because it's easier. Stop that. Nothing in life is that's worth fighting for or worth having is ever easy. And we know that. Most people know that saying, and it is never truer now.
You know, what they've done, they've got made you lazy. They've made you like, don't you worry about it. You just go to work. You just come back and pay your bills, take care of your family and everything, and we'll do the rest. Leave all the decision making to us. And that's been our biggest mistake, because we've left it for them and we've took our eye off the ball. They've signed us up to all sorts of bullshit in the background, what we haven't been monitoring because we've just trusted blindly. The time for blind trust is gone. Now we've got to watch these like an hawk, and we've got to point out everything that's going on, and we've got to put a stop to it. Exactly. You do that under Article 61.
As Godfrey says earlier, it's now time that we really start taking an interest in the civil services. That's why social services, courts and stuff out, and do it properly. do it properly, we'll have a change and we'll be able to stop this. But why we're doing this where it's the case of it's like, well, we're just going to write a letter, because petitions don't work. Parliamentary petitions, I've said this for so many years, to the point where I remember I proved this, didn't I, Gary, in the wording and everything. And I think I've proved the whole lot. A parliamentary petition, so when you're doing these online petition stuff out, you're given over your details. And most people would go, oh, I don't want to do you're Article 61. You're just basically, it's only you and the people that know you that know bits. It doesn't need to be your address and everything, your email. It doesn't involve all that. It really doesn't. But you'll sign a parliamentary petition, and that petition, literally, you can get 300,000 people who sign it, and that's really good. If them 300,000 people could just put their signature onto an Article 61 form, you'd see a massive difference. But 300,000 people will sign a petition, and all that means is that Parliament have to discuss it. So literally, it's like every 300,000 people put a petition together to say that, right, you and Gary have to talk about this. And me and Gary go, right, then we're going to talk about it, but we're only going to talk about it for 30 seconds. And there you go. We fulfilled our end of the contract because we spoke about it. I know it was only 30 seconds, but that's all we're obliged to do. That's what you're doing with these parliamentary petitions.
Yeah,
It's the same.
It just says it has to be discussed. It doesn't say an amount of time, a lot like you said. It's not a lot of time. It just so neither could stand up and say, we've got to talk about, oh no, allowing children on the park, after 8 o'clock. Well, I don't think we should do. Okay, that's it. But we've talked about it. And that's it.
That
you ain't going to go into detail. Like most people think they do.
Well, dudes, we're going to wrap that here because I don't want to go too further on to the one we've got through that. So we won't go too further, but we will do another live in another couple of days or next week. So, and we're going to do a proper live because I want to talk a lot more about this and about method in what we do, because most people who have been following us for years know what we did in the Fabian Society. They know that we got the police to actually back our charges of sedition, treason, malpractice, a lot of them. The only thing that was lacking was the people. Now, we put out a letter. If we had the people that would, if we had the same amount of people that would sign a petition for something that's happened recently, if we had that amount of people that was willing to put their name to the prosecution, we would have had Sadiq Khan, Keir Starmer, and a lot more politicians prosecuted and possibly in prison by now. But everyone's ignoring that because it's like, well, I mean, this petitions. I mean, everybody's getting on it. Stop following the crowd. Sometimes you've got to stop following the crowd. But this is the thing: if we had that backing, and they, like you say, most people like Katie stuff, they need your backing. So they don't just need you to go, "Oh, you're amazing." They actually need you to join in with what they're doing, and this is the problem. Everything's being diverted to literally like just dead ends. It is a dead end at the end of it, and this is not to put anybody down for what they do or anything like that, because Gary, that there was a time in the beginning when we done parliamentary petition things out, but it's like we learned over a number of years that they didn't actually mean anything, they didn't work, it wasn't the way to go, and this is how we arrived at our constitution, our laws, our rights, our freedoms, our liberties, and our customs. Because these are the only things that we can uphold, and this is the only things that actually hold these people to account. And people don't understand that. You talk about the constitution, like, but this can hold account. It's like, yeah, but the government says it doesn't exist. It's like, well, the government does say it exists. I can prove that with government documents. It's just they want to change it, because the very government that are telling you have no rights, you don't have a constitution, and there is no laws that actually stop them from doing what they're doing. That it's the same people that are trying to take this away from it. They've hid it in our education system. They've hid it within our judiciary. They've hid it everywhere, and they've indoctrinated people to believe that these no longer. No, they have always existed. They will always exist as long as you uphold them. As long as they mean something to you, each and every one of you, they will always exist. It's what people got to understand. But we won't go to that. I'm going to end it there. And then we'll jump back on another day, and then we'll jump into some of these subjects. We've got a few shows coming up. Might have a few people on to have a little chat about some of this as well. Yeah. But yes, we should leave it there.
Stop. Just think about what you're doing, ladies and gentlemen, and think about, it's time. Remember that program in the 70s, Love Thy Neighbour?
Yeah.
That's what you've got to get back to. Love thy neighbour. and you've got to start standing up for your community again. That's why the community is stronger back in the day, because if you've got somebody come to cause trouble at a particular house, the police turned up at a particular house, everybody knew them people, and you'd have 3 or 4 people from 3 or 4 streets away come and stand outside the house and say, you're doing nothing to this house. These are good people, they've done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what will happen if you don't, and they start rounding people for these camps, example. If you don't, because it's coming eventually, they'll starve you out and burn you out to the countryside in nearer and nearer the big cities in these camps. And when they're doing that, if you don't stand your ground as a community, if you don't stand up for your next door neighbour, how can you expect the neighbour the other side to stand up for you, depending on which way they're coming, if they're coming up the street or down the street? How can you expect your neighbour next door to stand up for you if both of you didn't stand up for the neighbour the other side? And that's what I'm trying to say to you. You've got to get that community spirit back.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
100% agree. And this is, again, long marks for freedom. This is to bring not just you and your local communities, but this is to bring all groups, all causes, everything together. Because once you actually dive into this deep enough, you'll understand. But there is primary sources for everything that happens, whether it's to do with our children, our animals, our freedoms, our rights. Everything, there is primary sources, and when people all come together and actually look at these things, you'll understand this, and then you'll understand the power of us all standing together. But like I said, we'll discuss that in a show in the next day.
And I'll leave you with this. What you've got to also understand, ladies and gentlemen, is everything that they do, they've already got it. You don't know what's coming. They do. They know what the problem is. They know what reaction they're looking for, and they know what solution they want to put forward. But it depends on your reaction to the problem they've put out. And at the moment, we're failing miserably because every problem that they put out, we're reacting exactly how they want us to.
Yep,
so they can bring that solution that they want in. We've got to start saying, problem off. There ain't no problem. We're all right. Then there cannot be a solution.
Exactly, and this is the thing. And what we need is solutions to the main problem, and the main problem is the very people that are doing this to us, and that's where we need to focus our energy.
Exactly. But that's not happening, is it, mate? They're giving problem, waiting for a reaction from us, and then giving us a solution that we're screaming out for.
Yep.
And that's wrong.
It's delayed. And then in that time when we've concentrated on that one problem, the reaction, and then their solution, not our solution, it usually is their solution. They've already created or done something that's magnificently more worse, and we just don't understand, because it's like the sleight of hand. It's look over here, why I do this, and that's what a lot of these things are. And this is not to put any cause or anything that happens down. It's not to minimize anything. But what we're trying to say, to truth say, these that are often being used is like, these are bad things, and bad things happen in the world every single day, and they are being used to distract us. And they are. That's why certain things you'll see all over Facebook, but you won't. It's like Godfrey says, you won't see on the news. You won't see our politicians saying that when they think a group of people who get together in a completely different country, who are not elected by us, they're not accountable to us. Our politicians, the very people who want to run our country, are saying, but that means more than our parliament. That means more than your rights and your democracy. And this is what we've got to start getting into. This is what we've got to start understanding and fighting against. We've got to start removing these people. There's only one way to do that, I can assure you.
Yeah. I'll tell you why they're allowing this stuff with these dogs all over Facebook, everywhere, Twitter. The reason they're allowing that is they want to take the pets. They want to exterminate pets. For instance, if you let your dog off on the field and he's a big dog, they want to be able to come like you said, Nathan, come across with a drone, a bit of what's it on him, a gun on it, and go bang, 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 kill your dog. It's not on the lead. All this sort of thing. But they want to do all these things, but they need to know what the public's reaction to it's going to be. So now, Yeah, so now they're allowing everybody to talk about what's happened to these dogs and everything, to see, oh, we hadn't better do that just yet, because the people will kick right back. But the minute that they do it and there's hardly any kickback and nobody's talking about it and nobody's angry, that's when they say, now's the prime time to do it, because everybody's don't bothered about it.
It'll be normalised.
Always remember why.
All right,
yeah,
I'm gonna leave it there, and then we'll jump on
Yeah.
YouTube. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Pauline, it'll be on my YouTube here, so if you go play this video after, you'll be able to see the beginning bit. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you everyone for leaving comments, and we will see you next time. Good night, everyone.
Yeah. See you later, guys. Thanks a lot. Speak to you all soon. Have a great night.